In chapter 32 of this text, yet another aspect of God's working in our lives involves this subject called predestination, which Christians have debated ad infinitum in school, in church, and everywhere religious dialogue takes place. So let's just talk about this and see if we can come to some agreement in our theology about how we view this. What is the issue? Well, some Bible texts seem to teach that God decides who will or will not be saved. Romans chapter 9, verse 11. Yet, before the twins were born or had done anything good or bad, in order that God's purpose in election might stand. 2 Peter 1 and 10 here. Therefore, my brothers and sisters, make every effort to confirm your calling and election, for if you do these things, you will never stumble. And then Ephesians 1:4. For he chose us in him before the creation of the world to be homely and blameless in his sight. In love, he predestined us for adoption to sonship through Jesus Christ in accordance with his pleasure and will, to the praise of his glorious grace, which he has freely given us in the one he loves. So these are just a sample of multiple Bible texts that presents this issue that God seems to be in direct control of our spiritual lives. Well, there's a couple of solutions to this. Number one is the option exercised by John Calvin. Calvin, remember, builds his theology, his philosophy, around the theme of the glory of God. And what Calvin wants to do is glorify the sovereignty of God. Also remember, however, that Calvin is trying to encourage those people in France who had previously been Catholics and had been converted or convinced of the Reformation Protestant beliefs, and consequently were being told by the church that they were doomed to hell. Calvin is trying to encourage those early Protestant believers that they do have their salvation, that God has chosen them, that they're not going to be condemned. What he's trying to do is to exalt the glory of God. So he's not just a needless scholastic. He's trying to comfort people who are being threatened. Now, the second solution is that of Arminianism, and what is meant here, and this phrase is used in the text, would be the theology of Wesley. More precisely, this would be Wesleyan Arminianism, which holds that everyone can freely choose to be saved. Therefore, Christ died for all, universal atonement. And what we call predestination is based upon God's foreknowledge of the choices we will make, and since God foreknows what we will do, he therefore brings that to pass. So it's a way of having your cake and eating it too. Well, toward a solution. Basically, all who will be saved will be saved. We can rest in that. And that's the sum total of our hope. But a primary error may be the assumption that God thinks like we do. What if he does not? And see, as human beings, we involve in thinking which proceeds from one step to the next. It's linear thinking. We have a thought at one moment, and another thought the next moment, and another thought the next moment. So if we decide at a given moment in the past, that's a point in the past that leads on to the future. But what if God doesn't think like that? What if his thinking is above ours? What if there is a sense in which to God every place is here and all time is now? What if in the totality of his divine being, his way of thinking is simply beyond us? Then it would seem to me the Bible can use terms like predestinate, foreknow, ordain, as analogous words that are indicating some understanding of something on God's part that we cannot explain. Another way of looking at those words might be they might be anthropomorphisms. An anthropomorphism is a word that is used from the standpoint, the perspective of our concept of reality, that's trying to stand for something that God does which may be above us and which we may not know. We don't know the answer to these things, but the best option is to simply look at totality of what the Bible teaches. If we do, we'll find humans are free in their choices. God is free in his choices, and we're left with the polarities. And so, to return to that passage of Jacob and Esau in Romans, Jacob have I loved, Esau have I hated, is it teaching that God has chosen specifically who's going to be saved? Or is it teaching that God has chosen Israel to be a special people? How should we do that? One could argue either way. The point is that God is free, we are free, but somehow God's will be done, and we can simply affirm his goodness.